Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review the fourth episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So, I would say there's kind of a give and take with this episode. There is a big, exciting thing happening towards the tail end of this episode and whatever and what have you. But there's also a lot of downtime with this episode as well. So, recently a lot of people would say, man, this episode was a big thumbs up and whatever, because it was kind of really exciting. The things that they did was probably much more fascinating and much more intriguing than in the last episode. So I guess I can give them that. I would say that this episode is like a thumbs up episode, but like we also had to deal with that kind of like slower stuff that kind of like didn't really mean anything, and there was a lot of times where I was just kind of like, okay, like what is the point of any of this? But anyways, it just push on. So we we end up having it to where within this episode, it kind of feels like there's an arm race going on within this episode, which I do kind of enjoy. There is kind of speculation between people of like, well, if you had the best gun in the world kind of thing, would you use it kind of thing? And like we have a lot of speculation going on in that episode about this, and I really do enjoy that kind of thing. And talking about this, of course, cryptically at first, and so then we'll get into spoilers. And I also like that we really do kind of have a closure moment of Wakanda within this episode, but it isn't exactly telling us what happened to T'Challa. So we won't get that. We won't get much of that. We'll just kind of just get a little whisper of anything. But moving on. So we have it to where U.S. Agent is kind of in desperation within this episode, and desperation because I think this character is desperately trying to be relevant. He's like, "Hey, could I play too? Could I be in this party? Could I play with your toys too?" Kind of thing. Could I be in here? Could I, can I belong? And so on and so forth. And we have it to where U.S. Agent is desperately trying to fit in with these people. And when we get to the very end of this episode, I'm like, whoa. Like, somebody's going to need a PR person, so to speak. Like, the very end of this episode is so much better than a chunk of this episode. And so there's kind of, like, to me, I'm much more happier with this episode than I guess I could for the last episode, because my grievances of the last episode were there's too much crap going on and none of it was really important. Where in this episode, there could be things that interest me in this episode overall. It's also just the fact that anything of kind of a name value was just like, ooh, what, like Wakanda? This character? What's going on with this character? I'm intrigued. I kind of don't like what they're doing with Sharon Carter in the show. I don't like it at all. I think it's kind of a waste of time, to be brutally honest. And I honestly think if you're going to have her in the show, have her in the show. She doesn't feel really in the show. She just kind of feels like a person who's basically like a secretary. And that's awful to say, but that's who I feel she is, to be brutally honest, in this episode. Or just in this show, really. Just a person that's like, oh, well, hey, let me go and let me figure out some stuff for you and I'll be back kind of thing. That's who she really honestly is. since she's been on the show. It's sad. And I want her to have a much more prominent role in this show. I realize that it's like, oh no, well, it's the Falcon and the Winter Soldier show. And she's just kind of there. And I get that, but I don't like how she's handled. I don't like that at all. So it seems like we get a little bit more of understanding of the Flag Smasher character who is Carly. I say Flag Smasher character because there's like a couple of Flag Smashers. So like I guess she is the leader, but like any person could wear that mask and be Flag Smasher, to be brutally honest. So it seems that I think that's all that I can really say cryptically for this episode, because I think anything else would almost go into probably spoiler territory. So I would just say, if you haven't watched this episode, I honestly think it's worth watching compared to probably a lot of the other episodes. If you're behind, go ahead and bust them all out. Recently, this episode is much more worthwhile than probably the last episode, because we have it to where there's some key names and there's some key stuff going on where you're like, there's kind of some backstory from one of the Avengers movies, so you can enjoy that. And so definitely check this episode out, because this one's going to be like the one that's like, ooh, wow, this is exciting. And a lot of people are just like, oh my god, this is the greatest episode I've ever seen in my life. Big thumbs up, oh my god, oh. And like, I'm not going to go that route. I just won't. I just refuse. I think it's like, it's good enough to almost be great. But there is also that little chunk of part there that's whatever. So going into this, let's go into spoiler time. So reasonably, John Walker is just kind of tugging on the coattails, just like, hey, could I play? And we're going to see if he can play or not within this episode. So, spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this episode. So, the opening part of this episode, we are now going to go into spoilers. So, we have Bucky in Wakanda, having a character named Ayo or Ayo. I'll pronounce it Ayo because I think that sounds nice. We have Ayo, who had talked to Bucky in the previous episode at the tail end of it to say, like, hey, I'm from Wakanda. And Bucky's like, oh, well, that's great. Thumbs up. And so we have this flashback from Wakanda where Ayo is telling Bucky all the magical words that Zemo had said to him before to control him. And Ayo had been doing this bizarrish, like, therapy, whatever thing, to have these magical words no longer affect Bucky. It doesn't show how she does it. It just basically has her say the magical words, and Bucky is boo-hoo crying, and the words have no effect on him, and she's like, you have been cured. And so, really, there's no process, it's just, you have been cured. And so, flashback to more current time, to where Ayo and Bucky are talking it out, where Ayo is saying, well, of course I'm here for Zemo. It's like, come on, like, we gotta get this guy back into prison, or this guy's gotta die, or whatever. And Bucky's like, well, yeah, but, like, give us a minute. Like, we need Zemo to help us get further on in what we're doing. And Ayo doesn't want to hear any of that. She's like, no. Like, he needs to go to jail for his crimes. And we have it to where Bucky's like, well, you know what? Like, I appreciate everything that you and Shuri did in Wakanda. I'm like, wait a minute. So we have no. He doesn't say T'Challa. So we are to assume that they are already quite possibly doing something with that for Wakanda. Because I'm just like, okay, so Shuri is. I just want any little bit of something to just get a little just something to just kind of see what they're doing, and so for to set up for the Wakanda show because I think Bucky might be involved with that show. I'm hoping after this show is over. So we have it to where Bucky is to go back with Falcon and Zemo, and we end up having them eventually talking about how they have are getting some information about Carly on how eventually Carly is going to mourn the loss of her family member because she has to go to a funeral, and so we have it to where the guys are thinking, well, I think that's the perfect time to strike and get to her and try to talk her down and whatever. We're not going to come in there like guns blazing or whatever. Like we'll talk to her later. And so we end up having Captain America and Battlestar kind of coming in and saying, well, hey, like, could we play too? Can we play in your playground? And so Falcon and Bucky are like, well, hey, sure, why not? And so we have Falcon, uh, we have Falcon and Bucky uh, and Captain and Battlestar following Zemo out to this informant. And so this informant is a little girl. So we have Zemo who is following this little girl, and the superheroes are sure to follow. And so we end up having Zemo telling where Carly and them are going to be at. And so we end up having Falcon and Bucky going on further, and John Walker ends up going and handcuffing Zemo to this thing and saying like, okay, hey, go on, because I'm just going to keep watch on Zemo, because this guy needs to be arrested. And so we end up going along into having Falcon and Bucky ending up kind of busting in on Carly and her funeral kind of thing, to ultimately just say like, well, hey, like we're here and we're going to like try to talk you out of this and try to figure out a way to call a truce kind of thing and have it to where like she'll give herself up. And so we end up having the Flag Smashers not give themselves up, and they end up kind of running off. We end up having them run off to eventually end up going into finding out where their home base is, and we end up having John Walker, Battlestar, Falcon and Bucky all chasing after these guys, and we end up having them have a bunch of seemingly little test tubes of super soldier serum just lying all over the ground. And we end up having Zemo trying to chase after these people, and he sees the test tubes or whatever, and he ends up trying to crush all of them, and he runs off. John Walker ends up running after Zemo, and he ends up seeing one vial of it, and he ends up like putting it into his pocket, just going like, like, hey, what do you think I'm gonna do? So we end up having it to where uh, eventually the Flag Smashers all end up getting away, and then everybody's kind of just having egg on their face. And so now we eventually have Falcon, Bucky, and Zemo, John Walker, and Battlestar now all back at their little hideout. And Oye is becoming very impatient and just going like, hey, like, time's up, buddy. Like, we need the Zemo character and we want him now. And so we end up having, fortunately, Captain America and Falcon and everybody all going and fighting out the Wakanda the Wakanda people. And so like we have a really cool fight scene going on here where basically they are like outsmarting even Captain America, kind of making his shield like basically irrelevant, to where they're basically taking his shield from him, and to where one of the Wakandans end up taking and grabbing the shield from U.S. Agent, to where it's just like, dude, you're not that strong, and you're not Captain America. So we have it to where even John Walker is getting outmatched between Wakanda women, and that's like, yeah, that's freaking awesome. I'm like, yeah, that's great. So we have a tour that's pushing even John Walker more to just be like, well, you know what? I have a test tube full of magic, and I might as well use it, right? Because we end up having this battle out to where we eventually see Zemo going into the bathroom and sneaking out of this sewer to evade this fight out. And so we end up having it to where Zemo ends up sneaking away, and we have it to where after this whole fight out, we seem to have Falcon getting a call from Carly to tell him, it's like, well, hey, like, or no, wait. Falcon ends up getting a call from his sister because Carly ends up calling Falcon's sister to let her know. It's like, well, hey, like, I want you to tell your brother that, hey, I know every little thing of information about his sister and her sons and everything, exactly, that she is on a boat somewhere at a pier and whatever. Like, I'm telling you this so that way, like, if he thinks that he knows so much about me, I know so much about him. And so I want to be able to now tell you that that if Sam Wilson wants to meet, I am going to meet him at this location, and I want you, Falcon's sister, to tell him that. And so we have Sarah who calls Sam to tell him this information, and Sam is kind of saying like, well, hey, like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep you and your son safe. Like, believe me, that's my first priority. And so we have Bucky listening in on this call, and Sam is like, well, yeah, uh, Carly threatened my family, and so like we're gonna go and we're gonna hear her out. So if this time around we had Falcon with just like kind of casual, just street clothes, we end up having Falcon coming to see Carly in full on Falcon gear, and we end up having Captain America and Battlestar and Bucky following him because Carly had told him to come alone, but Bucky's like, no, I'm not just going to leave you stranded. And it was kind of interesting with that Wakanda fight because Bucky was fighting the Wakanda women, and they ended up basically taking his metal arm off. And it was kind of interesting because Bucky just sees his arm just like coming off, and the girl is just like, "Meh, I have your arm. Ha, sucks to be you." And we have to where Sam is like, "So you didn't realize that they could have done that?" And he's like, "No, I didn't realize it." And so I'm assuming sometime after that, like Bucky's gonna have that fixed to where nobody's gonna be able to do that again. I would hope. So going on into here, so we have we have Sam and Bucky going to Carly, and so Bucky's like, well, I guess you didn't really pay attention to me telling you to come alone. And Falcon's like, no. It's like, so like what do we come here for? Like, so we end up having one another kind of give up a little bit of information here and there, but really we have it to where both are still not legitimately coming to a true legitimate truce. And we have it to where eventually this ends in a fight out forcibly because we have John Walker just kind of making his way in here to try and make an arrest kind of thing. And that ends up pretty much blowing up in his face because the Flag Smashers are starting to see it's like, well, hey, it's a numbers game now. And so we end up having Carly put on her mask and they end up just fighting it out. And so because John Walker won't let the Flag Smasher just walk away because he ended up having Zemo kind of vanish. And so we have it to where I think reasonably to where now he's not letting Flag Smasher get away. And so we have this big old fight out, and we have seemingly now Captain America, U.S. agent, now has the super soldier serum. And you can see that he is really just flinging people around. Like, people are flying through walls and all kinds of things and, like, being flung and all kinds of things. And so we end up having Falcon and Bucky just going like, dude, did you seriously take the formula? And Walker is saying nothing. He's just walking on. And so, because we had a moment between John Walker and Battlestar where they're talking about like, man, if you had the serum on you, like, would you take it kind of thing? Because when looking at it, we could have saved a number of lives if we ever actually had the super soldier serum with us. We could have saved a ton of people before when we were in the military, when we were in the wherever we were, because we have it to where John Walker is mentioning about the awards that he had gotten and how basically like he had to get these awards for to cover up all the pain that he had from all uh, those trials that he had with being a soldier and so on and so forth. So we have it to where also Zemo was talking to Falcon about, hey, if you were ever uh, given the super soldier serum, would you take it? So Falcon immediately says no. And Zemo kind of feels the same way. He's like, yeah, I wouldn't take the super soldier serum either. So that's why we had Zemo crushing all the samples of the super soldier serum, because I'm like, well, wait a minute. In the comic books, I remember him, I think, having the serum, but I guess maybe he lied. Maybe he, I don't know. Maybe he just um, maybe he did steal a thing, and then maybe we're gonna find that out later. Because who knows? Maybe there could have been any number of people. Uh, and plus, also, I'm wondering if there's going to be a blood transfusion happening sometime in someone's future, and so on and so forth. So, but going on into this episode, so we end up finding out that John Walker, now Super Soldier Serum guy, and so now we end up having it to where John Walker is coming in here, I think, way too aggressive, just full blown, just really attacking these guys, and we eventually have it to where uh, Battlestar is caught in the crossfire, and we have one of these super soldier serum flag smashers that take Battlestar and hit him so hard against this column, this totem or whatever, that he ends up, I think, breaking his spine and dying immediately. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? That was my straight up reaction when I saw this. I'm like, wait a minute, what? I'm like, this guy didn't get enough screen time and he is just put on here to just be killed off? What? Like, dude, this is like the fourth episode, halfway through, and I guess it just had to be like, oh, well, here's like the mid-season finale thing, to where it had to end on like a somber moment or whatever, where I was like, what? Battlestar dead? No. I was like, come on, like, he can't be dead, but no, he's freaking dead. And I'm like, I'm kind of ticked, but then I'm also just kind of like, but man, is this going to be an interesting scene right after this with US Agent, and man, does it. So we eventually have it to where right after Walker is trying to like grab on to Battlestar to check if he's dead or not, immediately right after that, we end up having seemingly Carly, I guess, making her way out, but we have it to where US Agent has to take his own consolation prize. And so we end up having it to where US Agent is starting to fight uh, this flag smasher out in public, and just starts outpowering him because of his anger. And it gets to the point to where the flag smasher just surrenders, and he's like, no, no more, like, please, no. And we end up having US Agent taking his shield and just like slicing this guy's head, I'm sure, clean off with this shield, to where you're just seeing blood at the very end of this shield. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, yeah, like, this is going to be a big problem for for the people who had been behind US Agent, because they are probably just gonna be like, yeah, you need to take you need to take a big step back before you're gonna go out there again, and because this is probably gonna be a big no no, to where it's like, dude, you killed a defenseless person in the middle of public. It's like, I'm sure he'll be able to just say, well, hey, my best friend just died, but still, it was a defenseless guy. He gave himself up, and Walker just chopped with his head. And I'm like, wow, this is a crazy ending. And that's how the episode to me just ends. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. To see that we have a Captain America that is killing people, and not only that, a defenseless person, because this guy's like, hey, Zob, I quit, blah, blah, blah. And so this guy just, yeah. So I think with that, that is the way to end this review, with that visual of that shield just half blooded. And yeah, so pretty good ending. It just took us a while to get there, and so on and so forth. So speaking of getting there, I'm going to get out of here. So goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.